Welcome back, Commander. My name is Lucas, and today we'll be building the conventional X-9 rifle from XCOM Enemy Unknown. To start off the project, we'll first want to make a template. I grabbed some reference images from the game and then traced them out in Inkscape. The template is available in the description of this video. Since the gun is larger than one sheet of paper, it's broken up into multiple sections. We can line up the different parts by placing the template against a window or other light source and lining up the crosshairs. We'll start off by making the magazine and the magazine well. First, we'll trace the shape of the magazine well onto a piece of foam board with the help of a ruler. And be sure to label the left side, the right side, the inside, and the outside, because it starts to get confusing pretty fast. The total width of the magazine well needs to be the same width as the entire gun. For me, the total width of my gun is going to be 3 layers of EVA foam, and 2 pieces of foam board is about 1 layer of EVA foam. So I'll need 2 layers of EVA foam between the walls of the magazine well. I'm using scrap foam here since this part isn't going to be visible, but we do want the outsides to be as flat as possible. I'm also adding a thin layer of craft foam in the middle, just for a little bit of extra width so that it's easier to take in and out the magazine. For the magazine itself, we'll copy it onto foam, score in these grooves here, which will add a little design once it's heat sealed. For the bottom of the magazine, we're going to be tracing the main part of the magazine onto a piece of paper and then adding a little bit of border around that. This will be the template for the top of that part, and the part from the original template will let us know how tall to make that part. Before we glue the 2 halves of the magazine well together, we want to make sure that the magazine fits on both sides. In order to get the magazine to stick, I'm adding a tiny magnet to the inside of the magazine well and a piece of metal to the top of the magazine. Using Velcro strips is a potential idea, but depending on your piece of Velcro, it might be too strong for this application. Next up is the main body of the gun. You could keep the stock attached to the main body, which would make it a bit stronger, but I'm choosing to make the stock a different piece since it'll fit better on the piece of EVA foam that I have, and it would be better for transporting and storing the gun since this is pretty large. The body is made up of 3 pieces, the left, the right, and the center. For the center, we're going to cut out a notch in the middle of some arbitrary length, and this will be filled in when we make the stock. Note that we aren't cutting out the trigger here. For the left and right parts, we're just going to cut out the foam as normal. For some of these smaller details, we'll just want to leave some space, and we can trim it later once we've glued the 3 pieces together. The stock is also going to be made out of 3 pieces, left, right, and center. And note that the center piece is going to be a little bit longer since it'll fit inside that notch that we cut out from the main body. You can make the left and right pieces only this section here, like what I'm doing in the video. However, that means that you only have 1 piece of EVA foam holding up the stock, which means it's going to be a little bit weak, ironically. I added a little bit of foam board here to try to strengthen it up a little bit, but it is still kind of weak. Alternatively, you could make this entire section here out of EVA foam, and then cut the foam so that this section is only half the width. I'm wrapping this section in craft foam to make it look a little smoother. Once we have the main stock cut out, we'll cut out this section here. We'll keep 2 of them, which we'll glue together and then glue them here. For the back of the stock, you'll have to create a template based on how wide you're making your own gun. The tops should be curved and the bottoms should be angled off. For the trigger, you could just cut out the shape, but I think it would be a lot more fun if you could actually pull the trigger, so that's what we're going to do. For the center section, we'll cut out a block for the trigger and glue 2 pen springs to that block. We'll also cover this part here and this part in tape to reduce the friction between the 2 pieces of foam touching each other. We'll have to make sure the tape goes all the way down, otherwise the tape might peel up and tape the 2 pieces of foam together, which isn't what we're trying to do. Now we'll assemble the main body of the gun. We'll glue one side and the center together and make sure that the trigger still works. If it looks good, then we'll glue the other side. Then we can trim these small details here that we left out earlier, add some detailing that'll pop out once we heat seal the foam, and we'll angle off all these edges. We'll also glue down the stock if you're making it a permanent part of the gun. Next up, attaching the magazine well to the rest of the gun. First we'll test fit this just to make sure that they fit. Trim down the foam if necessary. For the 2 sides of the magazine well, we'll cover them in a bit of craft foam to make the layers less noticeable. It'll also fill in a small gap that I have between the magazine well and the trigger area. One thing to note when working with foam board is that your hot glue gun can melt the foam in the foam board, so be a little careful. For this handguard section here, it's thinner than the main body of the gun, so I'm using 2 pieces of EVA foam. I'm also adding craft foam for detailing. Note that craft foam shrinks quite a bit when heat sealing, so you may want to heat seal a sheet first and then cut out the piece. and we'll trim this piece as necessary. For these detail pieces on the side, we're going to cut them out of full-sized EVA foam. For the front section here by the barrel, we'll also need to shave down these corners. And now we'll want to trim the front of the gun and even out these layers. For these parts on the side of the magazine well, it's actually supposed to look like this, but I thought it looked a little bit cooler if we made it look like this. Both are included in the template, so choose whichever you like. This section here is a little bit taller than this section, so I used half foam board and half EVA foam. We'll also cut out these for the part near the scope, and this, which goes on the two sides of the gun. For the right side only, we'll also cut out this square here for the ejection port. Once we figure out where this is going on the main body of the gun, we'll want to draw these two lines on the foam for the ejection port, and then we'll score it into the foam. We'll also cut out this, which goes in the middle of the gun. The gun should now look like this. For the barrel of the gun and this upper section, I'm using an old Parmesan cheese bottle and a medicine bottle cap. For the medicine bottle, I ground out the threadings using a Dremel, and I cut off the top of this bottle. I also lightly sanded the side of the bottle to help the paint adhere better. The bottom of my bottle has a large divot, so I'm filling it in with a bit of scrap foam. When looking at the front of the gun, you can see all the layers of foam, so we're going to cover it with craft foam to make it look smoother. We'll also cut out two circles so we can attach the barrel and the other piece directly onto the main body of the gun. For the iron sight, the base is one piece of EVA foam. The orange U section is also EVA foam, and the side walls are foam board. Note that we want the bottom to be the smooth part of the foam, since that'll be visible. For the scope, I want to actually be able to see through it. So I have this plastic red folder here, which is semi-transparent. We'll cut out two squares. The rest of the scope we'll make out of foam board. I'm also including a piece of foam board in the top for a bit of added strength, and also capping it off with a piece of craft foam so you don't see the edges of the foam board. You might choose to make the scope attachable to the gun by Velcro, again for transporting and storing reasons. The prop should also be heat sealed and coated in multiple layers of watered down white glue. Note that the foam board paper kind of melts from the watered down white glue, and the foam core in it melts from the spray paint, so maybe this wasn't the best choice of material. Before painting, the prop will look like this. For painting the gun, I first spray painted these sections black, then painted these sections gray. We'll also want to paint these sections a darker shade of gray. I picked red as the accent color, which we'll paint on here. One mistake I made was trying to paint over the gray primer paint with red acrylic, and that didn't work out so well. I had to use a lot of red paint and a bunch of coats, so make sure you use a white primer first. Lastly, we'll weather it with a little bit of silver paint. And now, a short test film. If you want to build this prop, the template is available in the description of this video. For anyone that does, I'd love to know how it turned out. If you also want to build the conventional pistol from this game, I've got a video on that too. That's all for this project, so thanks for watching, and good luck, Commander.